And thank you for being here, everyone. Just a note for everyone that is on Zoom, we also have a classroom full of people who are here viewing this together in the Visual Arts Center. So welcome everyone that is in the shared viewing room. Thank you all for being here. I hope that you all got the note that the artist is not here in person tonight. As you can see, they are on the screen with us. So this is Michael. Okay, so my name is Jamie Platt, and I am the gallery director for the School of Art and Design. And tonight we are fortunate to have with us Michael Hubbard, one of the artists who is in Convergent, which is the exhibition that is the one we're talking about tonight. And we are going to hear from Michael very soon talking about their work. Before that, I am going to make a few announcements, and then I will introduce the exhibition Convergent, and then we will get a chance to hear Michael talk about their work. So I'll begin with announcements. First, one housekeeping note for everyone that's on Zoom. Please remain muted throughout the program. There will be a Q&A at the end, and at that point, if you would like to, you can put your questions in the chat. And actually, if you have questions for the artist as we go along, you can type them into the chat whenever you like, or you can wait till the end. And it's also possible at the end that if you would rather say your questions aloud, you'll be able to put your raise hand emoji down at the bottom of your screen, and then I'll call on you. So that will happen when we get to that point. And second announcement, the exhibition Convergent is on view now and through tomorrow. So tomorrow is the last day. If you're in the area and you haven't had a chance to see the exhibition yet, then hopefully you'll get to see it tonight if you're here, or you can come tomorrow between 10 and 4 and see the exhibition before it closes. And we also have a reception tonight at the end of Michael's talk. There will be a reception in the Carroll Gallery. So if you're here, you'll get to join us for that. If you're not here and you can get here, the reception goes from 6:30 until 8 p.m. And we also have another exhibition on view in our Burke Art Gallery that's on Smith Hall on the campus of Marshall University. That exhibition is called Senses. It's a two-person exhibition. It's open until November 4th. And we have another exhibition that is going to open tomorrow in the Student Gallery. Generally Desert is a group exhibition on the theme of food scarcity in Appalachia. So that will open tomorrow, and there will be a reception for that show on Saturday between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. So it's a special reception. We normally don't have the galleries or have events on weekends. So this is a unique opportunity. If you want to come down, and in fact, I'll probably open Convergent also on Saturday. So that's one more opportunity to see it for those 2 hours, 2 to 4 in the Carroll Gallery and the Student Gallery on Saturday. Okay. And then finally, it is almost time for our senior capstone exhibitions to begin. The first one is going to open on November 7th. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for more information about those. You can also check the website for the School of Art and Design, and you can find information about the upcoming senior capstone exhibitions. Okay, so Convergent. Convergent is a 3-person exhibition. It was curated by the gallery committee of the School of Art and Design, and the artists didn't know each other prior to this exhibition. They each one are exploring identity formation, each one in a unique way. And so we thought that their work resonated together, and if you have seen the exhibition or if you get a chance to, I think that you will agree. So the first artist that I want to talk to you about tonight is Parker Reinecker. Parker is an artist and educator currently living in North Carolina, where he teaches at a community college. Reineker's creative process is a mixture of traditional lens-based photography and photo collage using found photos. The artwork on view in Convergent comes from a pair of two of Parker's recent bodies of work, and both of them are exploring the formation of social identity in regions where there is racial and economic disparity. Stafford Smith is another of the artists in Convergent. Stafford lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where he is a professor at Grand Valley State University. He is fourth generation American, and his work is, and also he is of mixed racial heritage. In his work, Smith creates photo collages from found photos and images from popular culture to talk about what it means to construct a sense of self through the collection of family memory and photographs. The work is by turns surreal, haunting, and beautiful. It is also at times infused with the subtle humor one sometimes finds when they realize the futility in trying to construct one's personal history and fill in the gaps where there are some. So finally, I would like to introduce Michael Hubbard. Hubbard is also an artist and educator. They earned a BFA in painting from Savannah College of Art and Design and an MFA in visual art from Washington State University. Michael is a contemporary figurative painter who has been invited to speak on their work on numerous occasions. They have exhibited widely, including a recent solo exhibition at East Lubbock Art House in Lubbock, Texas, and a group show at Vestige Concept in Pittsburgh. Hubbard lives in Midland, Texas, where they are a professor at Midland College. Thank you for being here, Michael. Silent round of applause, everyone. Okay, Michael, if you'd like to share your screen and go ahead and start now.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to Jamie and the gallery committee there for setting all of this up and putting together an amazing show. I wish I could be there in person. I love speaking to crowds at universities and colleges in person, and glad that I could at least be here in this format. But thank you all for putting together such a good show. It looks great from everything that I've seen. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. I'm going to talk about my own work quite a bit, but I also I want to start off by talking about the show as a whole. Of course, I'm just one person in this group show, and I wanted to talk about the show as a whole before I get into my own stuff. I want to get into a little bit of like what I see as the connections between the three artists on display. I think it's a really great, I want to say pairing, but what's a pairing when there are three of us? It's a great kind of combination of works where they're very different, but there are these through lines, these threads that run between them that are sometimes really apparent and sometimes maybe not. But I wanted to point out a few of the things that stood out to me about the three of us as artists, and comment on a couple works by Parker and by Stafford that really stood out to me. Of course, I am just an observer as far as their work goes, so my commentary is kind of my own view of this. But so what I see as some of the themes that stand out. Of course, as Jamie said, there's this idea of identity that runs through all three of the works. Beyond that, I see in all of our work a reference to community. So there's individual identity and how that is constructed, but in all of them, there's also this idea of a broader identity, a social identity of people in a region, in a family, in a community. And the thing that I'm probably going to lean the most on is a visual similarity, a visual kind of thread of layering and remixing imagery. I think all three of us have a really interesting relationship with photographic imagery in particular, maybe me least of all, but as you'll see going forward, it's still, even though my work is in paint, the photograph is still an important part of it. So I'm going to, I've put in a couple pictures of works by Parker and Stafford. Just a couple of pieces that really stood out to me. Again, I'm offering my thoughts as an observer here. I've listened to the artists' ideas about their own work and kind of what they're thinking, but I don't want to place myself as an expert on their work. But this pair of photos from Parker's Two Cardinals in the Thicket series really jumped out to me. I'm also basing these, the things that stood out to me on photographs rather than being there in person, sadly. But I really love artwork that makes you work a little bit. And I think these photos do that, just that dark tone and barely visible imagery. Is it photos of flowers shot at night? Is it altered somewhere in the photographic process? I'm not sure. And Parker talked about these photographs from his region of the world as kind of little snippets of the community there, like a way of trying to understand a community by looking at really small sections of what's around. That idea really spoke to me, and one thing I like about his work a lot is the way he juxtaposes these individual photographs. So I talked about one of the themes here being the kind of remixing and layering of imagery. And even in these instances where it's pretty much a straight photograph, the way that they're combined and related to each other, the way they're hung in the gallery in a very intentional kind of installation style, not just to be viewed as a photograph on a wall, but they relate to one another. They're kind of individual photographs that are layered together to create more meaning. And I chose this photo from his desegregation series. They're all so great and complicated, but this one was one of the pieces that stood out to me. I think the concepts at play of identity and community here are a little bit more obvious. And also this juxtaposition of imagery, this layering of things that fit together and don't fit together at the same time. That's the complication of layering images that I think happens in the work of all three of us. Where there's a fit and there's this point where it doesn't fit, and that tension becomes an important part of the work. In this one, I like that there's a suggestion of this being a single three-dimensional space that everyone, excuse me, that all of the students are in at once. And then that form also falls apart with there being just a single cutout image, that the faces of one group of students turned and looking, the other group looking away. these points of contrast become really important, really powerful. From Stafford's work, similarly, it was really hard to choose just a couple. This piece, Family Reunion, and I should say I heard Parker talk a lot more about his work than I did Stafford. I've listened to some interviews, but I think, again, there's this really interesting layering of images and a couple of ways of looking at identity here, that there is Stafford's own identity as an individual who comes from a particular heritage, a particular history, and also that kind of communal identity of his family. One of the things that I found really interesting in hearing some of the things he said about his work is that he couldn't always find images that were from his family that fit into the framework that he was building. So some imagery is sourced from other sources, from I want to say like just scrap photos and other places where he found imagery. And looking at these, knowing that I don't know what is his family photography and what isn't, and that's kind of exciting to me, that there's this question, this doubt thrown into all of it. And what I took from him speaking about that is that is kind of an interesting thing about family storytelling, is that there are always holes and gaps and things that you're not sure about, and things that have to be filled in artificially. And this was another that really stood out to me. I like that in this and a few other photos or artworks like this, there's the imagery is really obscured. The different layers of images are obscured by each other. So some of them, like the previous one, are setting a pretty clear scene, even though it's clearly structured and layered and composed of multiple images. And others, the photographs really kind of become difficult to pick through and difficult to find your way in. And I think that also speaks a little bit to that disorientation of history, the difficulty of finding oneself or finding one's story. I hope I've done some justice to their work in talking about this. But these are the things that really moved me and that I found a connection with. I'm going to move on now to talking a little bit about my work. And those same themes are really central to what I've been doing lately. So they'll definitely come up again. In the gallery in Convergent, there are examples from kind of two related bodies of work that are ongoing. One of them being fairly representational scenes of figures in moments of movement and balance and contact, and the other being imagery of floral or botanical forms mixed with parts of human forms that become a bit more tangled and abstract and constructed. I want to start off by talking a bit about how I got here, how I got to where I am right now. For a long time, I was making work that was dedicated to celebrating my feminist punk rock heroes. So they were basically portraits, kind of complicated portraits of people who, for me, fit that description of a punk rock feminist hero. They were people who I admired, people who were important to me. This painting right here was the first one that really set me off on this path, which lasted quite a while. And some of the styles, some of the techniques that I've used in these carry forward to what I'm doing now. but working with very different ideas. These paintings tended to be layered imagery of the same figure from different angles or different kind of moments in motion. A couple of the things that I was interested in here was depicting something a bit more complicated, more complex than just a simple, straightforward portrait. Attempting to show more of the personality of the kind of life force of the person being depicted by showing this sense of movement or showing multiple emotions in the same picture. So that was the first one that I made in this series of work that lasted about a decade. And this is the last painting that I made in this series of work. I guess it wasn't quite a decade. And this, the thing that kind of happened with the end of this body of work was I came to the realization that I was very intentionally, possibly not successfully, kind of pushing my work away from myself, making work that was about other people, that was about history, about culture, that was important to me, that had a huge impact on me personally, but was definitely at an arm's reach. And there was a point where I had a discussion with a curator where a certain part of this body of work that I'd done, he felt was really super personal. These were mixtapes that I had made that were dedicated to each mixtape was dedicated to one person, sort of a, without my realizing it, I think it was sort of like a letter, a something that's being sent out to that person. And that realization kind of pulled me back and made me want to think some more about putting myself in the work, thinking of myself as someone who's worthy and can be at the center of the artworks that I was making. And also at this time, I just got burned out on making the work that I was making. Artists in the crowd, I'm sure, can understand that. But there were a few years of almost writer's block of just not being able to make anything that I was happy with, while these ideas of what can I do to make this more personal, to make my artwork more about me or more authentic, more just more of me in it. Around this kind of end of this body of work, I had started to explore or focus on still thinking of my punk rock feminists, which is a really broad, wild identifier. It encompassed people from Joan of Arc to Joan Jett, people all over the spectrum of history and culture. But I found myself gravitating towards some figures that were really intentionally questioning gender constructs. So a couple of these pieces that I have here, the one on the left is a portrait of Ana Mendieta, an artist from one of her performances where she was taking cut hair and attaching it to her face as like a beard and a mustache, of kind of taking on these trappings of a different gender. On the right, one of my very, very favorite, most influential artists, Claude Cahun, who also her entire career was dedicated to questioning, challenging, unpacking ideas of gender. And in this one particularly, there are two portraits of Cahun, the artist, and layered in with that is a portrait of me, which is barely visible, but this at the time was, I think, as much as I could bear to do to put myself into one of my paintings. But kind of the curve of the jaw and the chin is me. Laid, kind of put in place, layered with a portrait of Claude Cahun. I should say gender has always been a big question for me. My own experience of and identity within gender has been something that's, for as long as I can remember, has been a big part of who I am. Though for a long time, I, as with anyone, I think, didn't put a name to it, didn't put a real signifier on it. But this questioning was, I think, at the root of some of my drive to make the work that I was making before, but it was always subdued. It was always very background, and started coming more to the forefront in recent years. This is a couple of artworks by Claude Cahun and her partner Marcel Moore. These were artists in the early to mid 20th century, kind of before, through, and after World War II. Very, very, very interesting people. I could do a whole lecture about them, but I won't today. But look them up if you don't know who they are. But they worked a lot in photography in these kind of really constructed scenes where on the left, it's Claude Cahun herself. As far as pronouns go for the two of them, it's hard to say what they would prefer, but they always refer to themselves as she, even though they took on male names for themselves, male pseudonyms. So the photographs were usually attributed to Claude Cahun, but were actually taken by her partner, Marcel Moore. And on the right is a collage that was made by Marcel Moore using some photographs of Claude Cahun. Cahun will appear a little bit later in the lecture, so I wanted to give you a little bit of background there. But coming back to this kind of last, what I considered a good painting in this series, there were a lot of bad ones that happened after that and didn't make it, didn't survive. After this, I was searching for quite a while, trying to figure out where to go. And this question of me, this question of my personal experience of gender became something that I started exploring more, particularly in 2020 when everything suddenly was shut down, when I switched to teaching online barely, and had this kind of space and time. I recognized that COVID was not great for most people. For me, it provided me with a little bit of space to set the things I had been doing aside and experiment a little bit. And this is what I started doing, creating these, what I call my dancer series of paintings that were an attempt to express what gender feels like to me. So they are layered images of people in motion. There's that kind of brought over from my previous work, where gender is layered, obscured, erased, very hard to see. This is the first one I made. That's Dancer 1. I don't like it, but I've put it in there just because that's the starting point. They got better as time went on, but I guess there was enough of something of value there for me to keep going with them. I have, I think, 12 of these dancer paintings now. I took a break from them for a while. I felt like I had kind of done what I needed to do with them. But they started for me to really represent this what I feel as a person versus what actually there is physically, biologically on the outside. And I wanted them to be figures that are isolated, in motion. There's this idea of dance, of movement, of freedom. And what I want there to be a sense of joy as well in that movement. These are painted in oil on plastic. I gravitated toward this medium. Oil has been my main thing for a long time. I love painting with oil. Working on these plastic sheets leaves the brush strokes super visible and keeps the colors really bright. It's just flat and smooth. It's kind of like traditional oil painting on tin or other metals. Um, and I liked that sense that the paint just appears to be kind of floating there. It's just paint by itself, raw and kind of fleshy and chunky. So you can see individual brush strokes, the kind of thickness and movement of the paint. All of the work that's in the gallery that I'm going to show in this lecture from here on is oil on plastic. So I continued with these paintings for a while. Again, there was this idea of really, I wanted to revel in the ambiguity of the figures. Sometimes there's kind of a suggestion of a certain sort of body, and sometimes there's not, and sometimes they conflict and contradict each other. But more than anything, I wanted a feeling of movement and joy. I've recently come back to this series. This is in progress right now. This is a detail of one that I'm currently working on, which, yeah, in talking about these works recently and kind of getting back to that idea of like this being a self-expression, kind of reinvigorated me and made me want to make some more of them. One of the central ideas here that I've already mentioned is dance. In the case of those dancer paintings, it's an isolated figure, a complicated figure, kind of dancing alone. Again, that's probably a reflection of what was going on at the time, that it was mid-COVID, it was very isolating. I often was alone. Which is a good thing and a bad thing. Dance has always been something that's really interesting to me. I always say if I had life to do over again, I would want to be a dancer. I would probably not be a very good dancer, but who knows? But I love it. And I started, as I'm making these kind of lone dancer paintings, thinking more about groups of dancers. Some of the dance that's interesting to me. I'm really attracted to modern dance, modern ballet, and some of the dance forms that are kind of tied into ordinary movements or ordinary activities. This kind of Judson Dance Theater mid-20th century thing of finding beauty and complexity in ordinary movements versus a really rigid kind of like ballet type dance. These started influencing some other ideas for paintings that I've made. There are, I mean, these are dances that are sometimes done alone, sometimes done in pairs, sometimes in large groups. But there's often this, as with these last two slides, this feeling of bodies working together or in conflict or kind of bumping into each other in interesting ways. And from making these lone dancer paintings and also kind of being away from having a sense of community in my own life, I started wanting to make paintings with multiple figures with this thought of ordinary movements turned complicated, turned sometimes elegant, sometimes awkward, but this exaggeration of an ordinary scene. This is the first one that I made. It started with a little sketch, just this idea of two people kind of falling into each other. The core of the idea was that the trust fall, that thing where someone stands behind you and you fall backward, trusting them to catch you. But made a little bit more complicated here with the fact that the person in the back is also not in a secure position. I was searching for this idea of balance and imbalance, that there's this kind of moment caught where there's a feeling of things being secure, being balanced, but if you look a bit more closely, you'll see that it's impossible. This, for me, was expressing an idea, a continuation of that idea of multiple layered figures, these different sides of the self or different feelings within oneself, but here separated into separate identities. So kind of finding balance or seeking balance between multiple sides of the self, while also in a completely different direction, thinking of community, thinking of people who are actually able to or attempt to support each other. In making most of these paintings, one of the things that was, I think, most challenging for me was that I was literally bringing myself into the artwork. These start off as drawings, start off as kind of an idea of what figures could be in a space, and then move into a photographic stage where I photograph mostly myself, and combine them afterwards. So I sometimes try to obscure my face or alter it or change it completely so that it's not me, but there are definitely places where I peek through. So that's one where I think it's pretty clearly me back there. Also here, this is a piece that's in the gallery. Sometimes my face just works, and it's important to me. These are paintings that are, I don't want them to be self-portraits, but they're definitely self-expressions. They are at their core about me, even though they can hopefully expand beyond that. So sometimes I'm there, sometimes I'm not, but I'm always there. So I started off with a few paintings that are pairs of people in these poses where they're balanced together or not balanced together. Started pushing that into larger groups of people, 3. I actually don't think I've gotten past 3. It becomes a bit more complicated, a bit more scattered as we push further. Another thing that it kind of excited me about these paintings, I had been working for a long time with found imagery that tended to be kind of cropped for me. The backgrounds are sort of defined already. The edges are defined. With these, I enjoyed exploring the space around the figures as well. These are all imaginary spaces. This is entirely constructed, and thinking about what I can put into these backgrounds, these spaces that are going to push and pull against the figures. This painting called Geese because the pattern in the background is a quilt pattern called Flying Geese. Some of the paintings include a lot of like really just random references. Some of them are a bit more steady. This is a kind of the starting point for all of these drawings of people is generally a sketch of some sort. Really small thumbnail, quick off the top of my head, just me thinking about how figures could be combined in an interesting way, how they can support each other, how they can pull and push against each other. I think of it a little bit like choreography, but I'm thinking of these people almost as dancers as much as models that can be placed or move in these little scenes. Push and pull and pressure are really important to me. Like I want there to be a sense of the weight of that top person pressing down, a sense of the person on the left pulling. So that was the sketch for this painting. which obviously a lot changes as it moves on from that process. From the sketch, I take photographs, I combine the photographs, I change things, I add things, and eventually paint it, which adds even more complexity and choices. This is a little sketch for one of the paintings that's in the show there. This is definitely an idea of impossible balance where things would not really support each other, which eventually became this painting, Atomic Rays. Here, this is a little bit more of an abstract space than I've made in a lot of the paintings. The brush strokes kind of combine to form this really ambiguous place. The title comes from I mentioned that dance is a huge influence for me. The other thing that has been an influence for a long time is music. So there is on the ground a Blondie record sleeve down here for the single for the song Atomic. And then one of the figures is wearing an X-Ray Specs t-shirt. Really great punk rock band. There are all these little kind of references that end up in the paintings that are things that I love. Again, these are paintings that are about me, so they're little bits of me that are thrown in here. Another piece that's in the gallery. I'm gonna speed along a little bit because I'm gonna run over. I wanted to point out, speaking of these kind of trappings of my own life and multiple references, I wanted to point out the back wall in this painting. This one's also in the gallery there. The back wall of this space is covered with little clippings of various pictures. These are things that were actually kind of floating around my studio at the time, but they all kind of refer to different ideas and different things. Sometimes they're referring to other paintings. This photograph that's torn out of a magazine of an installation work of these chairs balanced together. I thought that resonated in an interesting way with these figures balanced and also that chair there. There is here a photograph of Claude Cahun again. This over here is a little drawing that I had done for another painting, which you see on the left now. There's this little thing is a little abstract drawing that my son made. And up here, there's this arm reaching out that eventually found its way into this painting, which I'm still working on right now. So there are, throughout these paintings, just little things that, little details that sometimes I think I put them in there just to amuse myself, but hopefully other people will be amused by them as well. This is Soft Animal. This painting is named after a poem. Actually, the poem is called The Geese by Mary Oliver. The figure has a goose tattoo here. Moving on to these, this other line of paintings, these have been going on kind of at the same time, are combinations of flowers with parts of figures, generally arms and legs. A lot of the ideas here continue over. The figures are meant to be ambiguous. There isn't a clear maleness or femaleness that's put forth here. They are kind of an elegant motion, another reference to dance. These started off with paintings of pansies, which is a kind of loaded term culturally, one that I've been called a few times in school, but kind of, I liked the idea of flowers as this effeminate thing thrown in with these figures in complex ways. Here's another one that's in the show. These are really kind of explorations of form, of the way that these plant forms and human forms can relate to each other and overlap and provide movement and kind of a life force, a sense of growing, a sense of drama when they're combined together. I did move away from the pansies and work with some other types of flowers as well. I like these because they're a bit harder to read than some of the other paintings. Some of the simpler, maybe they're not that simple, but more straightforward figurative works. You kind of have to pick through them a little bit more and seek out what's happening there. I would have talked more about these, but I want to leave room for questions. So if you have any questions about the floral paintings, be sure to ask those. I will wrap up there. If you want to see any more of my work, you can find me at michaelhubbardart.com. I'm also on Instagram at Michael_Hubbard_art. So you can seek me out there, but now I think we're going to open the floor to some questions.
Thank you so much, Michael. So we have some folks in our shared viewing room, as I was saying, and then also here on Zoom. So what I'd like to do is open the floor to questions, and we'll alternate between those in the room and those on Zoom. And so let me see. I don't think there's anything in the chat yet. If you're on Zoom and you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them into the chat, or you can use your raise hand emoji from the reactions section. So does anyone in the room have a question? Okay, I'll start. Michael, I was wondering about the Mary Oliver reference since I first saw the painting. And now that I know that you have geese references in the other painting, I'm wondering which came first? Was it the Mary Oliver poem or the geese? Are you muted? I'm sorry.
Sorry, yes, thank you. I was working on them both around the same time. Part of my process that I didn't really mention, I take photographs and then work on them for a while in Photoshop. So kind of combining and replacing and moving things. So there's this kind of like Photoshop sketchbook thing that goes on. So I'll generally work on these things more than one at a time for a while. So those were both kind of rolling around at the same time. But I had heard the line from that Mary Oliver poem, which I wish I could remember right now. And I don't want to take the time to look it up, but this idea of the soft animal inside of you, which just was moving to me. And it became the title for the painting Soft Animal, and also that idea of geese was just kind of in the back of my head and somehow popped into that other painting as far as the background goes.
Thank you. Yeah, and for everyone who is listening right now, Wild Geese is just a wonderful poem, and Mary Oliver, if you don't know her work, is a pretty extraordinary imagistic poet. So I strongly recommend that you look her up. Okay, so it looks like we have some questions in the chat now. First, we'll take. This is from Dr. Rachel Danford. She's on the faculty here. She's one of our art historians. And Rachel says, thanks very much for your talk about flower paintings. You mentioned starting with pansies, but could you say more about how you went on to choose the flowers in later paintings? Is there significance, or are they chosen for their formal properties?
I would say that they are more formal, and they tended to be flowers that were around. They're photos that I've taken of flowers. the alstroemeria were some old, just like an old bouquet that had half wilted, and I enjoyed the look of them. I You can see in those paintings there are a lot of hands and feet. I like the expressive qualities of hands and feet, and I was kind of finding the same thing in flowers. That the way that the petals fell or the stems moved was expressive in a similar way to a body. So I know there are like there's so much on the meanings of flowers. I did not really get into that. I did one time do a Google search for masculine flowers just on a whim, and I'm surprised by how many like websites there are dedicated to flowers that you can buy for men, um, which just seems so strange to me. But yeah, it's more formal in that case.
And back to the room. Has anyone come up with a question yet? Put you all on the spot.
I have a question. I'm curious about why the pieces are self-referential, but that you kind of explicitly say that they're not self-portraits.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a complicated thing about representing a non-binary gender identity is that means really something different for, I think, everyone who identifies in that way, using that term or one of the other terms that are kind of hovering around there. They're definitely personal. I don't want them to be only about me. I'd like there to be a bit more, I don't want to say universality to it, but to be accessible beyond just being a portrait of me. And I think also there's this idea of representing an a felt version of myself, which doesn't always relate directly or overlap directly with my appearance. Is that a good answer?
He's nodding. Okay, let's see. Leah Teasdale has a two-part question, if you will. How long does it typically take you to get through a single painting, and do you ever do multiple at once?
I'll answer your second question first. I always work on more than one painting at a time. I'm working on 5 right now, which makes the first question trickier. I'm a pretty quick painter, but I kind of bounce from piece to piece. Partly for practical reasons that oil paint takes a while to dry, so sometimes you just have to step away and work on something else, and partly for psychological reasons that I just get bogged down too much in one thing and want to look at and think about something different. So yeah, I don't know if I can say how long it takes to get through a painting. It depends so much on like the hours in the day that I can put toward it. Weeks, not months. Maybe that might work.
All right. And back to the room. Anyone have any questions? Okay.
A lot of the work, like your flower works you were showcasing in the presentation, had like very harsh lines in them. From like a large portion of the image was like one thing, and there was a harsh line, and then it would be like a completely separate image that did tie it in ways, but it was like separate. Could you like delve into that a little bit, if possible?
Did you hear?
Can you paraphrase? I think I heard most of it.
Sure. So the question they asked is about how there's sort of a separation between the imagery in the paintings. So there are some harsh lines in the paintings where there are the flowers, and then there'll be a separate image. And she was just wondering if you could talk about that a little more.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the idea of like a duality or multiple kind of things overlapping or happening at once. The first kind of floral painting I made like that, I was thinking of it as though it were a larger image that was folded to obscure part of it. So I think part of that was like hiding portions of the imagery. Part of it was contrasting different parts of it, different sides. And part of that was just a formal decision that was interesting and exciting to me at the time. It also goes back to just the way that the imagery is composed, that they are from different sources. I think it's a thing that's done well in Parker's collaged work, where there are these images combined, but it's literally, you can see the square edges of the photo. It's the construction is very clear.
Is that, yep, she's nodding. Okay, good. Let me just check the chat. All right. Does anyone else have questions in the room? One of the things I was wondering about, Michael, your color. So you use a really kind of muted tones in some areas, and then you have heightened color in the flesh and in the clothing. And I was wondering if you could talk about how you make decisions about color.
I really love bright colors. I think part of my decisions about colors come from wanting these paintings to be joyful. I want them to be energetic, and they're depictions of kind of complex ideas about gender, things that can be troubling, that can be conflict, but overall I want them to be kind of joyful depictions of my experience of gender being a complicated thing. So those bright colors are always really important. And I think the muted colors are generally there to push against the brighter, the more vibrant tones.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Anyone on Zoom? Going once? Okay. Well, let's all give a round of applause to Michael in our homes or in our shared room. Michael, thank you so much for being here. It was really wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
And
I also want to say hi to Sandra. I saw you in the Zoom up there, my former professor who works at Marshall now. Thank you for teaching me how to paint. Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming.
Yes, thank you. And have a good night, everyone. Take care.